Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to do kind of an interesting one for me. This is actually one of my most interesting parts of the whole series. It's probably going to take me a little longer. I hope you bear with me because the whole thing is something that almost none of you guys have ever really heard. When we talk about the mark of the beast, and then you're going to hear about something I call the zombie trumpet. It is so crazy to hear that the Bible actually proves itself, and I'm bringing it up as we speak here, but the Bible just proves itself over and over again. And the reality is that when you pay attention to it, when you play around inside of the wordings and the understanding of it, it'll shock you. It'll take you to your core. So that's what we're going to spend a lot of time on. Coming right up. Okay, so let me bring it up on the screen here and we will talk a little bit about this. So again, the mark of the beast and the zombie trumpet. Okay, so I'm gonna show you first off a little bit about um, the overall timeline, and then we add pieces in. If you notice that each one of them are like, it looks a little different. Each time I'm trying to add to you something different. If I put everything on the screen, it'll like overwhelm you because it overwhelms me because I don't even have enough room to put this stuff on here. We are actually building a timeline, and we're still like custom discussing this one, trying to get this one fully out with this too. So, in essence, what we have the beginning of the trib to the end of the trib, that would be the great day of the wrath of the Lamb, middle of the tribulation. Okay, we start off with the pre-tribulation rapture of the bride. That's Revelation. First Corinthians or First Thessalonians 4:17 or 16, 17, 18. And there's a plenty of other ones in there too. I mean, there's probably about 15 ones. That's just the one that's off the top of my head with that too. And again, you're the bride of Christ. You're fulfilling a piece of Jesus. He comes here without his crown on his head. When he comes back, he has a crown on his head. We'll talk a lot more about that crownship nature of Jesus and what you are actually doing there. Now, in the beginning, also there's the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. Again, those first two, if you want to know a lot more, you can jump over to my Hope in the Last Day series. And I think it's the second and the third one show up and explain those two a lot more details if you want to get into that a little bit more. Okay. Now, the very first of this series talks all about the Antichrist. Guys, the beginning of the tribulation happens because Jesus introduces the Antichrist. Jesus has control. Don't think any other thing other than that. He has all the control. Now, Revelation 13, that happens in Revelation 6:2. But then we also notice in Revelation 13:1, we have another introduction of the first beast. Well, that's actually what I would call the spirit that comes into the Antichrist. You see, the Antichrist is a man. He's probably alive. I mean, if we are 3 to 5 years away, let's just make up a number, 5 years away, and we're in 2024. And I'm making up a number, okay? And let's say we're 5 years away, and the Antichrist is going to be 35 or 40 years old by the time he comes into his destiny by Jesus. Well, he's alive then, right? So he has his body, soul, and spirit inside of him right now. But he has to get an indwelling, a point, and this is not the satanic indwelling. This is the indwelling to make him into the first beast. When you understand how the writing comes in, there is actually a first beast. And this first beast actually has come through this kind of a possession kind of thing. Comes through many characters throughout a Revelation, or excuse me, throughout history. That's why some people will tell me, oh, it's all happened because of Nero. Well, Nero was a type of Antichrist. Um, Matthew was talking about it, and Jesus, through Jesus's word in Matthew 24, there will be many antichrists and many false prophets. That's what he was referring to. Nero's one of the first ones, but then there would be many, many more, including Hitler types, and it's just a huge number of people that will come through the ages that you'll see through that. Mao, uh, and so many different people, but they're never exactly the one. Satan's trying to bring up people to be the Antichrist. Don't think that he's not trying to do it, but God says, no, I have control of it. And that's the first beast. The second beast, and this is in Revelation 13, I believe it's in verse 3, 2 and 3, is the false prophet. He's the second beast. Now, I haven't really talked about him very much, but I'm going to bring him up right now because he's really important. His religious role, we think that he comes from a religious kind of thing. And again, he has a body, soul, and spirit, but he's going to be imbued or empowered, possessed by the second beast. This is another demonic character. He will actually speak and with all the authority of the first beast or the Antichrist here, the AC. So I say FP, the false prophet, AC is the Antichrist. And his first and primary job is to set up an image of the beast. Now, most people kind of get this wrong and they don't see it. They see it out there. Hey, the cabal and the other people, they would love to tell you that they have the image of the beast. They don't have it yet. They're trying to. Now, one of the most gorgeous types of the images of the beast is as an AI. Artificial intelligence is exactly what I think John is talking about in Revelation 13. When he talks about this statue type of thing, has the ability to animate. That's in the kind of wording that it utilizes. You're going, holy cow, you got to be kidding me. How can an inanimate object be animate? And we just think about it as satanic. Well, now we know we have some, and trust me, there will be some demonic and satanic things inside of it. But if we have artificial intelligence, and it's one of the conversations of my book, one of my books of 144,000, and you can see it on the Dr. Scott Young website. Now, the image of the beast is a really powerful point, and its whole goal is to get people to worship. Now, over the years, people have freaked out about the mark of the beast. Okay, the mark is like an etching. But it also is something, we think of it like a tattoo, but what it really is a point that designs you directly into the person. And you could also think of it as a logo. It is like wearing like the Denver Nuggets or the Oklahoma City Thunder or any other kind of thing. It identifies you with the group. Okay. And the mark of the beast is exactly like having a logo of your favorite basketball team or football team. It's the same kind of idea, but you take it to a new level of worship. Unfortunately, some people worship their particular basketball team kind of thing. Okay. And so that's one of the things that's really out there that's powerful of it. Now, you can't just have the mark of the beast. Most people are very worried that I could accidentally have the mark of the beast. Like I could pull out a credit card or have an account or have a quantum financial system or have a Bitcoin or have a blockchain kind of thing. And I'm going, you are not going to get it if you're a believer in Christ. Don't worry about it. God is going to make it so understandable for you. You're not going to like accidentally go, oops, boop, I bumped into the mark of the beast. Because there is a secondary element of worshiping that beast through the image of the beast, knowing that everyone couldn't see him. Okay? So those are those really important points. And we're gonna get into this as we go along here. In that same time frame, the second seal is World War III. So during all this craziness, he's going to have ways of kind of pushing people's buttons with that. Again, we have the third seal, which is the famine and hyperinflation. And by those way, those, as if you've watched through this series here, you know famine and hyperinflation always comes with a world war, excuse me. We predict as many as with these first four points, a quarter of the people dying, which could be as much as 1.875 billion. So, and I would say they're kind of an amalgam of one another. Okay, there's a famine, hyperinflation, and plague, and sword and death, and that's what it's trying to give you, and so they might be almost on top of each other. I put them off in a little bit of a distance there, but they might almost happen like this. Okay, and we don't exactly know how that will actually work, or they might kind of hit, and then the seal in heaven, the seal is opened. Okay, to reveal that, because Jesus is in control of the seals, and then he opens those up. But in the natural, they'll just notice it as like, well, this happened and this happened, and they're kind of like mixed together. Okay? And then the fifth seal is the martyrs. Now, I put the martyrs all the way over late in the tribulation, because it will happen directly based upon the mark of the beast. We'll kind of talk a little about that one too, a little bit. Okay. Go over to the left-hand side, the 144,000 young Jewish men who have never had sex with a woman. This is a real interesting group of people. These are people who come up because the bride of Christ is gone. When you're gone, who's going to preach the message? They're introduced at this time frame, the Revelation 7. Their job is to preach throughout the world. Revelation 7 verse 9 intimates that they bring into the kingdom a massive number of people throughout the world, all nations, tribes, tongues. A fascinating kind of conversation. And that's actually in heaven. It's a longer conversation than we get into in the Hope in the Last Day series. During this time frame, Matthew 24 talks about severe deception. Now, many of you have seen deception. If you've lived through 2020 through 2024, we have seen some very massive level deception. But I would say, let me put it on a scale of 1 to 10. If you think this was bad at a 10, just making up a number, okay, scale of 1 to 10, the deception that will come in that time frame, because by the way, you as the bride of Christ are already gone. The deception that comes out without that truth basis that is run, because many of you people have been Christians like me for 40, 45 years, right? So you're talking about people who have been dripping in the word for decades and decades. Well, guess what happens in the beginning of the tribulation? People who have been believers for days, weeks, months, before this deception shows up. How are they easily able to combat that in a powerful way? That's kind of the point, and that's actually in 2 Thessalonians 2 through 12. That kind of understanding of the depth of that deception. But it comes to mess with people so that they misunderstand the mark of the beast. But it actually indicates that those who, even the elect, might choose it. Now, the elect, I would say, are the people, I don't even have this on the list, are the chosen, the ekletos. Those are the people that will believe in that first half of the tribulation. Now, in the middle part of the tribulation, we get into Satan needs to be God. Now, the reality is that he has a body, soul, and spirit here. He gets an extra spirit, And that indwells him or imbues him at this one point in time. So does this false prophet. He gets the second beast in him. So these are really, really ugly boys. Okay? And by the time we get to the middle of the tribulation, there is a wound. And this is actually talked about in Revelation 13, that the Antichrist has a wound on his head, and he, in essence, dies and comes back to life with that. But Revelation 12 intimates and gives us this understanding that there is a war in heaven at the same time that this kind of stuff is happening in place. So there's stuff happening in heaven here that is not an exact same thing happening on the planet. So this is really fascinating. Um, but as soon as Satan is kicked out of heaven, he's going to come into the Antichrist, and it's believed that he spends time with the Antichrist and Antichrist and the first beast, and Satan is now the overriding thing. And that's where we get the worship point. We don't really get the worship point here. We get the worship point only when Satan comes in. And he actually makes the temple, that the Jewish temple that would be built around this beginning time frame, he makes it have, it's called abomination, which causes desolation. Now, the Left Behind series tried to tell you a little bit about this, and there's other series that try to tell you about it, but there is no way to tell you how in the Hebrew those words really mean. They mean every gross and disgusting thing, every pornographic, every disgusting horror movie thing that you can do, he will do in that temple. Think about that for just a second. Pause. He's going to do that in the temple. That is how gross it's going to be. I believe it might even be on national TV or international TV, because they need to see who he really is. Now, in the in the second half of the tribulation, we've always talked about this, or you've heard me talk about this. That's when the trumpets show up. Now, the trumpets are in that second half of the tribulation, and the angels are preparing these trumpets. These trumpets are dipped in the bowls of wrath, but they're not fully in the bowls of wrath. Real interesting conversation in Revelation 8:2-6, that they're dipping in some of the bowls, but it's possible that the two witnesses that I believe show up around this time frame will also be able to tell you more about that, or they will be announcing this hail and fire. The next one that comes in is a comet with a volcanic eruption around this. And then the third one is a meteor that will knock out the seas. So this one is knocking out the seas and making them third of the seas bloody. This one here is making a third of the water, of the fresh water, bitter. And then because of those two, and we're going to talk about the fourth trumpet here, because of those first two, because you have extra earthly kind of events that are happening outside of the earth, hitting into the planet, like two of them all at once. Think about that for a second. And boom, bada boom. And you're going to have a third of the day, night, and it's going to be really bad darkening. Now, how long that darkening goes on for, we don't exactly know. Okay, I would say it goes on possibly for the rest of that time frame. How tough would it be to live in those days? Now, the fifth trumpet will show up here near the end time frame. Okay, so real near end, probably about 1.5, 2 years before the end of the tribulation. Okay, all right. So let's move on to the next part. So I want to show you kind of just a bit of a graphic, and we're just going to show you the walkthrough. Again, we've talked about this, but I want to share it with you again because a lot of people struggle with this. Because some people will tell me, like, Obama is the Antichrist. And I'm like going, yeah, they used to say that about Reagan, who's the Antichrist. Listen, he's not been introduced by Jesus. The introducer of the Antichrist has to actually do a whole bunch of jobs, and Obama doesn't meet up to that. And we'll talk about that too. But by the way, the Antichrist has to live all the way through the tribulation, and he goes directly. He die. He gets hit in the head. He dies. Satan comes into him, but he never actually fully dies. Michael will take him and the false prophet and throw them in the lake of fire. So he doesn't really kill them, but they die for eternity in that place. That's their judgment. So before the tribulation, the Antichrist is there. When we move into the next one, the Antichrist becomes that first beast. Okay? And I'm doing this again because I want you to hear it a couple times through. The Antichrist becomes the first beast. So we have an imbuing, an indwelling of that person. The next phase of it is the false prophet, who also has a beast in him. So even if you knew the Antichrist and false prophet, even if they're your neighbors, you might have a sense of them as kind of bad boys. I mean, you wouldn't like them necessarily. You might even know that this guy is maybe a pope or a religious type of figure, but you really wouldn't be real happy with this kind of dude. Okay? But when they come in the tribulation time frame, if you were to interact with them, you would sense the evil that comes off of them. There is a next level stuff with them. And it does, and by the way, that first beast and that second beast, Matthew tells us there will be many false prophets and many antichrists. Those two entities have shown up different times of the world. Hitler is exactly one of those time frames. Okay, Nero and many others, Napoleon. Those are types of world leaders that Satan tried to do that, and they had the beasts in them. There was probably a false prophet in there, and there have been false prophets throughout the ages. One of them that we've seen is David Koresh of the Branch Davidians. Happened in 1991, I think it was. And he is a type of false prophet. He just as easily could have had that second beast in him, and he dies. Well, again, you talk about a spirit that comes into him. He opens himself up to that spirit. And actually, David Koresh would say he was the sinful Messiah. So he easily could be a type of second beast. But again, only a type, because there will be an actual one that is the last one. Okay? We move next to the image of the beast. The false prophet is the one that drives this. This image of the beast is for the Antichrist, or the false prophet is for the Antichrist. This will be of the Antichrist. Now, the Left Behind series does a very nice job of this one. If you've ever read this, they spend a lot of time, building up that one, and they actually have like a tape player inside of it. But again, Tim LaHaye, Jerry B. Jenkins couldn't have imagined AI. You guys can. And if AI was in it, what could that beast really be like? Could he be throughout the world, seeming like he is omnipresent with that? That's probably what he's trying to do. Then we have a component of worship. There has to be a worship point. Now, I have brought up this concept of the Muslims who will have a call to prayer. There's a over the loudspeakers, there's a big, singing kind of a call to prayer. And then there's 5 times a day that they go and have a call to prayer. I would say there's probably going to be something very similar to that, and telling you it's time to worship. Even though you got your mark, you better worship now. And that component leads us into an agreement with Satan. I'm going to get into this a little bit more, but most people don't see this part. It is actually a fascinating hijack that Satan that is allowed to bring in that has never existed. That's why the mark of the beast isn't here right now. We do not have a worship component of anything that is like it. There's plenty of things that are like the mark, but they are not the mark of the beast. But because when that happens, we have to have a worship component that has an agreement. An agreement is like a contract, and that contract is signed, in essence, signed in blood. And then we ended up with the application or the mark application. So it comes on your right hand or your forehead. Now, I have gone a little farther, and I've done this a little bit in how we, see, I'm going to do this with the camera here, sorry, how he lived an undead life. Okay, this is a fictional book that is in the time frame of the mark. We talk a lot about the mark, and we talk about the fifth trumpet. So if you want to get into that, this will help you. This is probably one of the scariest books I've ever even thought of writing. Okay, you can get this at thedrscottyoung.com. It is a powerful book because of what it's trying to do. But that application, I believe, isn't just the mark. I think there'll be something a little bit more to that. Let's talk a little bit about something. I want to talk about the agreement part here. Now, we have the classic 666 numbers, and people want to spend too much time upon that. What that is, and it comes from Revelation, and let's just read it just for the heck of it, because you guys got to hear it. Revelation 13:18. Here is wisdom. The one who is understanding must calculate, and calculate means compute. This is a forerunner conversation of the computer. The Bible is predicting a computer, and you didn't even know it, did you? The one who is understanding must calculate the number of the beast, because it is the number of man. His number is 666. Now, here's what I need you to understand. When you become a believer in Christ, so I became a believer when I was 11. In essence, I was purchased. This is what Romans talks about. The book of Romans talks about is I am purchased. My sin is purchased by Jesus. It was taken on his back to, he is that sin offering, but he purchases the sin. He purchased it. He didn't just purchase my sin at 11 years old. He purchased my sin for the rest of my life. I need to keep my agreement, my spirit agreement in there. Think about that one for a second. See, some people think that they need to go into like, they need to go in front of a priest and confess their sins, right? I mean, 1 John 1:9 says, confess your sins to the Lord, that and he is able to forgive you of all of your unrighteousness. I mean, it talks on about this kind of thing. And what that really is putting yourself in relationship with God. It is not about the salvation part. The salvation conversation comes in Romans 10:9 and 10. Okay? But we have this purchasing of sin by Jesus, which puts us in a different camp. It puts us in a different placement. Now, Satan will have his own counterfeit. Now, as long as you are on the planet, you normally are a free agent up until the time you die. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. But I want you to think about that one for a second. You're a free agent up until the time you die. So even if you turned your back on God at 21 years old and you die at 68 years old, make up a story, right? And you get really sick with whatever, cancer, and you're on your deathbed at 68 years old, you can accept the Lord. And this is actually sort of talked about in 1 Corinthians 3:13 through 18, that you have this foundation, and whatever you build upon it, wood, hair, stubble, or gold, silver, or precious stones, that what that is it's burned in the fire. And then when you go on in the next life, in essence, he's talking about the next life, that's what you got left. Well, that's that purchasing that you do in Christ, right? But you can actually, or a person can just go all the way through and just leave their self in their sin. Okay? But in this circumstance, when we have the mark that's introduced, it is a really extra point that people haven't spent any time on. It is a Satan counterfeit of that purchase, but it is a once and for all purchase. That's why it comes with extra caveats. The false prophet creates a mark, which is a sign. The mark means sign in Greek. The role of the mark is to bring you into the death camp of God. Or excuse me, of Satan. Sorry. Death camp of Satan. So if you are 40 years old and you are living in the tribulation and you accept the mark of the beast and you become, and you do the worship thing, right? And you do the whole worship thing and you live through the rest of the tribulation, which is another 3.5 years. And let's just say you're 43 by the end of the tribulation. You have already been marked for death. You are absolutely going to hell. There's no way you can back out of this. Now, I know there's a lot of people that talk about, predestination, free will, and I have a whole book on that issue. But this is where we have a full-on hijack of that. This is what the role of the mark is. And it will be a life invasion of your privacy. Let's talk a little bit more about that life invasion of the privacy. So the mark of the beast could easily be just as easily as small as something that is in the tip of your finger. That's how small this thing is. It's not that old movie branding that you see, you might have seen in some old movies. It will have easily a GPS tracking. You can put GPS tracking in tiny little grains of sand like this. And we have it in cars and phones and everywhere. And people want to say they're off the grid. And I'm like, bah humbug, dude. You're not off the grid. You're on the grid. As long as you have a social security number or you have a cell phone or you have a car that's made in the last, 25 years or whatever, you're in the grid. They got GPS tracking on you. They know where you are. Stop. By the way, this computer chip has the ability, and it's exactly like the vaccine. That's why people who didn't study what was happening in 2020 were fooled into thinking that we had the mark of the beast right now. And the answer is no. They were trying to fake it. No, they wanted it. Don't get me wrong. They wanted it to happen. They were so excited, so enthralled with the idea. But God said, no, you don't get to do it. It will have financial information. It says that you cannot buy and sell. In Revelation 13:16, it says, and he requires everyone, great, small, rich, poor, free, slave, to be given a mark on his right hand or forehead so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. The beast's names or the beast's name or the number of his name. It's really, we can spend time just even talking about that. But you will not be able to buy or sell, which means that it'll have financial information on there. It could have your whole bank account, every bit of your bank account, every bit of your capability. And it will probably be presented as like, why would you want to get your information stolen? It's possible that it will have a security access. Do you know that there are people today that have security accesses in their hand right now? And they're putting on their left hand so they don't want to act like a mark of the beast. Well, they do this with little iris scans or these other kind of things, but instead they just put it on their body so you don't have to carry it around with you. It easily could have the medical information as well, because the medical information would identify you. And they'll probably tell you, this will be just the easiest thing. They'll be like, if you didn't know anything about it, you can have the financial information, your security access, your medical information on there. You don't have to worry about, worrying about passwords or any kind of thing. You don't have to have like Bitwarden or any of those other kind of password thing. This is your whole thing. Boop, there you go. Or, your forehead. It'd be like, Sign me up. If you'd never read anything about this, you don't know anything about it, you'd be like, that sounds like a great idea. But God wants you to understand it. Every person to understand how deep this point is. Because he wants you to calculate the number of the beast. So 6 is a man's number with sorcery. So we're talking about magic. 3 sixes, or a three point, is biblical prophecy in fullness of time. So it's got to come at the right time frame. So when you have 3 sixes, so back up here, 3 sixes, you have a mark of the beast, a man's number with sorcery. So what could that be? Your identification number in the biblical fullness of time. That's what the mark of the beast actually means. And the right hand or the forehead is the man's number in this permanent fullness of time. In the right time frame, it comes in. The cabal, no one else can make this happen. The Great Reset people do not have control of this. We are not at that place because we have to have the Antichrist before we have the mark of the beast. I told you, you have to have the Antichrist before you get the mark. You cannot do it in an opposite direction. I don't care what anyone says. Read what the word says to you. Why do you have to bring the mark of the beast? Well, let me just throw something out at you. Just possible. Do you remember how we have the second or the third seal and we have hyperinflation? What if around that same time frame it is almost a faked hyperinflation? What if all of the data is purposefully stolen from the people? And your credit scores, which are not really going to be in the same way with Nasara Jasara, but what if your ability to get credit is actually so compromised by this hacking issue that there's such massive fraud that people go, man, I gotta sign up for this because, man, I'm gonna lose everything. I'm gonna lose my job. I'm gonna lose my wife. I'm gonna lose my, they're gonna think of everything. And this could be an anti-hacking kind of issue. There's also economic chaos that can come from 700 million people. When you have the bride of Christ missing, and we haven't even talked about this, but the bride of Christ missing in the beginning of the tribulation is going to mess with the world in ways you can't imagine. The first 2 world wars, and even when you calculate all the other kinds of things, the first 2 world wars barely equaled 100 million people dead. If you added in all the other wars and all the bad things that have happened in the 20th century, you got maybe 150 million. That is maybe. We're talking on orders of 4 or 5 times more people missing like that. Gone just as easily as death is. And how much does that affect the world? It's going to affect the world in massive economic chaos. That's why he comes on the scene the way he does. Now, I also believe that the cabal, a new cabal is going to come back in charge. See, we have Nasara that is coming on, and I believe it will end at this time frame. A new fiat currency will actually come back on because they want to be in control of everything. They don't want a gold-backed currency at the time frame like we're about ready to have. They will want to have a fiat currency, a controllable thing. Even Donald Trump in January of 2024, if you're listening at this time frame, said there will not be CBDCs. What is that? Central bank digital currencies, because it could control the population. That's exactly what Mark of the Beast kind of stuff is. But people who think that we're at that time frame don't understand the rest of Scripture. They're pulling it out of context. The Great Reset wants fiat currency, wants communism, no ownership, government reliance for income, and they don't want any debt relief. Whereas Nasara kinds of things, it's a gold-backed currency. And then the people make the rules. So I think that what's happening is we'll probably see a flip over because most of the people that were doing the Nasara Jasara kind of stuff are gone. And we're going to have a whole flip over of the systems. Okay, so there is. Let's talk a little more about the permanence of the mark. My favorite pictures. I tell you what, I love this picture. I bought this picture on this site. It's just, I, I think we're not just going to have a little tiny thing here. People are going to wear their mark just as much as they would wear something like the Philadelphia 76ers. They're going to have it with pride. That's why I think we're going to have it in the forehead, where people will wear this kind of stuff, and in any other time frame they would go, I would never do that, but in this time frame they will do it because they want to. Again, it hijacks the death process. Guys, you have no idea how big this is. You see, you for your whole life have the possibility of choosing for God, choosing for Jesus. You have the possibility, if you die at 70 years old, if every single person listening to me is going to die at 70 years old or 80 years old or 85 years old, whatever year you want to talk about, you're going to die at a particular age, which you will, okay? You potentially would. You have the potential of going all the way through that time frame up until the very last day of your death and accepting Jesus. Except until you take the mark of the beast. That process is sealed. So you will be walking on this planet sealed for Satan. And I think that brings about some consequences that we will bring up here in a little bit. It is an ID with Satan. It's like having your satanic driver's license on your forehead. I believe it's a seal of God, and I'm a seal of Satan, and it actually brings much of the really bad things. When you read through some of those things, for instance, the first bowl only comes on those who don't have the mark of God, or specifically have the mark of the beast on them. And they will have grievous sores. And that means grievous sores. The sores will be so bad that they will want to die. And this is very much like the fifth trumpet. And that is near the end of the tribulation point. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about this one. I don't want to get too hard on it, but the fifth trumpet is the same curse, I think, that comes out in this way. It's without death on earth. It's a picture of hell. It is a 5 months point of torture. Let's get into that. But before we do that, let's talk about the basics of the fourth and fifth trumpet. Okay, so the fourth trumpet hits in Revelation 8, 12 through 13. And the fourth trumpet is a third of the sun. Excuse me, the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, along with the night. And it has 3 woe, woe, woe announcements. Most likely this would be left over because of wormwood comet of the third trumpet. So we have atmospheric, kind of thing. When you have the volcanic eruptions, what would it do to the areas? We have studied this kinds of things. When you study atmospheric conditions, hey, that's real global warming if you want to talk about it. When that kind of thing happens, it actually be global cooling in essence. It blots out the sun. Think about if you have a third less sunlight. Well, plant life is going to die in much of the way. And there's actually points that talks about how plants are being burnt. Third of the plants are already being burned away in the first trumpet. So now you just have made everything worse and worse and worse. I mean, it's some crazy stuff. But at the same time, the third trumpet, that comet, that wormwood comet, goes deep into the abyss. Okay? And it releases something that comes in here. So let's go over some of the basics, and then I'm going to talk a lot more about this. Okay? So the basics are this. On the fifth trumpet, it's called the second woe. That's real important to understand. There are 3 basic woe points. And this is the second of the woes. Excuse me, I said the wrong. This is the first woe. I said the wrong. First woe. So, first woe, not the second woe. A star falls into the abyss. Well, that's probably related to the wormwood kind of thing. The furnace creates a smoke. So into the furnace, and see, remember, these people at the time frame, they had no idea what was underneath the planet into the abyss. But now we know that that would create a volcanic type of a eruption or some type of an eruption that comes out of there. But out of it comes these locusts, and they go do a really powerful descriptor point of this. Now, I really don't spend a lot of time on that. A lot of people want to spend time on it, but there's really some kind of cool things that you could spend a bunch of time on that one. But those locusts cannot be killed. There's nothing you can do. Their job is not to harm the land, but they're only going to attack the people who don't have a seal of God. Now, let me just say something to you for a second. It intimates something that you probably never heard about. Only in Revelation 7 do we have people who are sealed of God. And they can't be killed. They actually exit the planet. That's the 144,000. In the second half of the period of time, I believe we're going to have people who are maybe, I mean, and the Left Behind series kind of says it as they have a cross in the forehead or some type of statement of saying they're sealed by God. Okay? So that these locusts can't go after them. And it's a seal on their forehead. It's whoa. So it means that anyone who has the mark or even doesn't have the mark yet, which will be very few, they will be susceptible to this scorpion sting. This scorpion sting is so torturous that for 5 months they will wish to die, but they will not be able to die. They will long to die, but it says death will flee from them. The fifth trumpet is so freaking crazy that it is never, this type of thing has never existed in the history of the world, this kind of idea. Now, I'm going to pull this off the screen here for a little bit because I do want to kind of talk to you. I want you to look at right at me for a little bit. Because in here, that death cannot die. Well, let me bring it up here just one more time, and then we'll finish this one. Possible abyss could be because of the Nephilim, small size, and the scorpion size. So the Nephilim are big god of guys, and they're in the abyss. And some people present that if they're in the abyss, they've been compressed into these gross creatures. Okay. And at the very end of it, it actually has this one point. Let me kind of flip over to my textual point in Revelation 9. You guys can do that as well. And it's verse 11. They had as their king, so they got a king. They got a real interesting kind of thing. Their king is the angel of the of the abyss. His name is, in Hebrew, is Abaddon, and his name in Greek is Apollyon. Now, remember, Hebrew is what the Old Testament is written from. Greek is the New Testament. And you're going, okay, why would it do this? Why would it, and both of those words means chief. And I mean, these creatures are screaming out. They will say the name that of their king. They have with them a king that's what it's intimating, that they have a king, and their king is Abaddon and Apollyon, or which is the same thing. And you're going, okay, where is this coming from? So I want to remove this from the screen. I just want you to watch with me for a second. When I was first studying for the Foretold Book 1, and I think it was in Book 2 where I kind of got into the fifth trumpet, I was really kind of playing around with this. This is the first time I was really dealing with this. And I remember it was 2015-ish. And God had me do something. And I remember a cousin of mine, I won't say her name, I said this on Facebook at the time. I said, God told me to go see World War Z. It's a zombie movie. And I said, I don't know why. I just think, but I argued. I told the story in there. I argued with God for literally 2 weeks. I was like, I don't want to see a horror movie. I hate horror movies. I hate them, hate them, hate them. And God just goes, you have to go. And I remember telling my friend, my white hat contact, by the way, I talk about him in the Nasara stuff. Will, I told him about this. He goes, you are hearing from God. You need to do it. All right. And I told this on Facebook, and you know, this one cousin, she was like, well, you're hearing from Satan. I'm like, shut up. You know, you don't know what I'm talking about, what's going on, why I'm in this thing. I go watch World War Z and I could barely get through the movie. Couldn't stand it. It's a zombie movie. And I'm like, what was the point of that? I mean, I had no idea. I'm like, I don't get it at all. It literally made no sense to me why I'm watching a zombie movie in the middle of doing the Foretold series. And I had to pause in the middle of the Foretold series because God told me to watch World War Z. Whatever. Now, I have studied a lot of different historical points just because I love history and I love especially American history on war history. But I had to go a little deeper on this one because I started to realize this zombie thing had something to it. Inside, there is a massive zombie craze that happens with people. At the same time frame, my son's younger at the time frame, and there was this thing called like, what would you do in a zombie apocalypse? Because the zombie movie was coming out. It was big. And I'm like, what do you mean, what would you do in a zombie apocalypse? I'm like, he goes, well, I go to Walgreens because I have one egress and you know, stack up. I've had medications and all the other things, and I'm like, I have food there at least. I'm like, what? Who cares? I mean, zombie. Like, why are we thinking about this? This fictional thing that we haven't actually talked about. And when you go back and research the history of the zombie movies, and I mean, the very first one was called The White Zombie in the 1920s. And then there's other things, and there are other kinds of tales with this. Let me tell you what the word zombie actually comes from. It comes from a man named Robert Southey. Robert Southey in the middle 1800s had wrote the Three Little Bears, by the way, that little nursery tale of Three Little Bears. And he actually was going on a mission to Haiti. And he tells this story, and then he comes up with the word zombie. He tells the story about tetracycline, that these chiefs would blow on the tetracycline upon people. If they got it too thick, it would kill the person. If it was too light, it wouldn't do anything. It was the right kind of thing. It puts the person in a catatonic stage. They would fall down, and the people, not knowing enough about medical issues, because this is in the middle 1800s, they thought he was dead. So they'd put him in a tomb. But again, the tombs you can't really bury him 6 feet underground in Haiti. You would put him in, above ground kind of tomb kind of points, right? So anyway, and what this guy the chief would do is go into the grave, open it up, wake them up after 3 days and say, I took your soul. You now work for me. And he was called the chief magician. Do you know what the Haitians called that chief in their language? Z-O-M-B-I, zombie. You go, what? The Bible and John, who doesn't know anything about the zombie craze that starts in the 1960s, and no other author. People have said that the Bible is has been corrupted, and I go again. You morons, you don't know what you're talking about, because I can prove right here this is talking about a zombie issue. And I'll go a little further when we go through this here. Okay, let me bring that back up to the stage. Because here's what I want you to see. In the zombie craze, and this is, there are these things called zombie walks around, and I remember them in Denver even. On 16th Street Mall, it's a walking kind of mall. If you would dress up like she's dressed up here, you could get a free bus pass and go all over Denver area. And they do these zombie walks. And this is exactly what those kinds of things are. And I go, why do people want to do that? And what I started to understand in 2015 is that they feel so dead in their soul, and they feel so dead in their spirit, that the closest thing that they can identify with is something that is dead. Because when you study the zombie genre, which is a very boring genre, the genre basically is, whether it's the Walking Dead series or any of the other ones, the zombie, I mean, the non-zombified person gets bitten at the right place by the zombie character and loses all personality. Loses, so if we have a body, soul, and spirit, the body is still there, or its body's still there. I don't want to flip you off here. The soul is gone, the spirit is gone. The only thing that's left is the body. So that person, let's just say she's that person, she doesn't even know that she's still married to, let's say she's married to this guy in the back, right? If she was really zombified, if we talk about that, she wouldn't even recognize that she's still married to him. All she'd want is the hunger to eat another person. Do you see how disgusting, satanic the nature is of this? And inside of this time frame, it says that death will flee from the people who are bitten. Let's take this one bit further. My wife is a psych nurse, and she has spent years with patients who have had psychiatric problems. People who have psychiatric problems, one of the things that you'll find is that if they, especially who are really deeply depressed, and they commit suicide, they will find a way. They'll probably do it more than once. Okay, they want to find a way to kill themselves, and some of them are really good at it. Some of them are just trying to scream out for help, in essence. But if in Revelation, let's see here, 9:5, they were not permitted to kill them, the people, but were to torment them for 5 months. The word torment means pain, to vex, to toil, to test these people in such application of torment. Their torment is like the torment caused by scorpions when it strikes a man. In those days, and it's talking about it specifically, people will seek death but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. There has been no one who has ever thought, this is why I did this book, How He Lived an Undead Life. Do you understand that these people in this time frame, no matter what they do, they won't die? I want you to look back at this woman here, and some of you are grossed out by her, but you need to be here for a minute. Sorry, but you need to sit here for a second, because this is the deadness of this person. She might be easily a person who has jumped off of a building and she's still kind of bumbling and stumbling around. She shot herself in the head and she still can't die. All of the blood has drained out of her and she can't die. She'll keep trying over and over again. And imagine that instead of a zombie walk that we celebrate at this time frame, right around Halloween time frame, instead they are marrying death. This is why I use this other picture here. There's a marriage with death. Think about this for a second. God goes, hey, you want to have the mark of the beast? I'm going to show you what mark of the beast really means. You are going to be dead because this is a type of hell. And I'm going to flip hell and put it on the planet. So people are going to act like they're in hell. They're walking around. They have no ability to die. I don't care if they drink a drop of fluid. Even not one drop, they still won't die. I don't care how much blood they lose if they lose all of their blood. Now, my postulation has been very strongly is that these people will have, many of these people will have killed themselves over and over again, but they haven't died. And if they haven't died in this time frame, at the end of 5 months, and it says that it goes on for only 5 months, because that's in verse 5. So it goes only for 5 months here. So we have a 5-month period of time of these people trying to kill themselves. And they can't do it for month after month after month after month after month. And then at the end of the 5 months, if you've already been dead, if you've done everything to do that, I believe it's like a zombie trumpet. I think you've already killed yourself. And I think we'll have just a ton of people drop dead. Millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people will die really quickly right after that because they have nothing left in their bodies. How, oh my gosh, are we at this kind of stage? And by the way, we're only at the end of this one. So let me go backward here, and I'm going to bring this up here because I want you to see this, not just to see what we've been here. I'm backing it up here so you can kind of see this. But remember, we've already been through World War III and famine, death, and plagues, and fire that's hail and fire and comets and all these other things. And then we have the zombie curse, and we still haven't even dealt with the World War IV that's coming. We haven't even dealt with the plagues. These aren't even the plagues. And I say to you people that think that you could live through the tribulation, I'm like, you have no idea. You are so out of bounds on this viewpoint. You think we've been in the tribulation? Does that seem like we have been in the tribulation? That's what the Bible says. Does this feel like the life that we've been through from 2020 to 24 sound anything like what the Bible says? And if you say it doesn't, then we're not there yet, guys. Because when that kind of situation comes, it will be out of bounds for many of you to realize. And so I'm just trying to share with you, and I'm ending the show here, so let me bring that up here. As you understand the depth of this situation, you will realize that's only the fifth trumpet. It's the mark of the beast is so powerful, so deep in this. It hijacks the death process, but then we have the fifth trumpet that will come pretty close to that time frame, and then it'll go like listen, you want to act dead. I mean, you've already taken the mark of the beast, so you're really setting yourself for death anyway, for hell. You're already on the path for hell. But let me just show you what it's really like. You guys have been celebrating murder. You've been murdering people, so I'm going to let you murder yourselves or one another. You're going to do suicide and murders left and right, just to get away from the sting of death. And I'm not letting you live. I'm going to let you live for 5 months with absolute pain of death. That has never occurred in the history of the world. How fascinating is the terror that will go on in that time frame. So again, if you think you can live through the tribulation, I'll say, you know what? You have no clue. You have no clue how bad it's going to be. But I'm trying to share with you so that you understand it, because that's how deep the word is. Inside of Revelation 9, 1 through 12, we have proven the Bible true again. It's brought up a zombie craze and it said it in a way that only John in 95 AD could say it without talking about the zombie craze that was happening, that started in the 1960s and has gone all the way through. It's a really, by the way, from a fictional standpoint, it is a really crappy level of fiction. All of your people who are alive, then they basically get bitten and then they chase around the people who are still alive. It is a horrible level of fiction. I mean, there's nothing really interesting about it. And yet, it fascinates the people because they're death inside. And if you feel death inside right now, God is calling to you that there's real life in there, that you can have that life. And if you want to know more about that life, we have it on drscottyoung.com. Come over and see us at my Telegram room too. But again, you can see these books on drscottyoung.com. And so the next ones that I think that we're going into next will be, I believe it's the sixth trumpet. That will be World War IV. I'm just looking at my board over here. So that'll be telling you a lot more fun stuff with that too. Thanks so much.